My father refused to walk me down the aisle because his golden daughter was having a housewarming party that day. But he calls me in desperation when I got a replacement for a long time. I always knew that my parents loved my older sister Vicky more than me. She was the planned child, whereas I was the result of an accidental pregnancy, barely 10 months later. They probably didn't even want me, but decided to keep the pregnancy going anyway. My mother's parents had passed away before I was born, but my father's parents were very much alive, so they took on a significant role in my upbringing. Granny and Granddad were the constants in my life, providing the love and support that I often felt I was missing from my own parents. I remember so many occasions when my parents would leave me behind with my grandparents and only take my sister on trips. When I was young, I didn't mind because it was fun living with my grandparents. But as I grew older, when I was 6 or 7, I realized how unfair it all was. But my problem wasn't just with my parents. It was also with my sister, Vicky. Although I harbored no ill will towards Vicky, I couldn't help but feel like an unwanted addition to the family. She knew this, too, and made me feel like an outsider every day in my own home. She was always competing with me over everything. Whether it be grades, attention from our parents, or even the smallest achievements, it felt like a constant battle for validation, and I was always on the losing end of it because my parents always preferred her over me. As a result, I felt really inferior, and we never really understood each other. Our relationship seemed more like a perpetual competition, with her always coming out on top. On one occasion, she wanted to be friends with a group of girls, but because she was a nerd, she was scared to approach them. One of the girls and I had art classes together, so she introduced me to the rest of the group, and we all used to hang out together. Vicky was so jealous of this that she got my parents to talk me into including her. Plus, whenever I was with them, I would try to fight back, but my mom would call me selfish, while my dad said that she was my sister and that I should look after her. I reluctantly agreed and introduced Vicky to the rest of the girls. Now, Vicky doesn't have many friends, so it can come across as over-enthusiastic. So I was constantly trying to impress the girls in our group, often proving annoying. Despite my best efforts, I found it hard to find my place amongst them, and the awkward tension between Vicky and the other girls was always palpable. For example, one of the girls was interested in a boy, so Vicky made it her mission to approach the boy and let him know that she liked the girl. He laughed it off because he wasn't interested and went and told everyone, which embarrassed the girl. After this, the girls made it clear to me that they did not want me to bring Vicky along to our meetups, so I agreed. However, Vicky wasn't having it. She threw a tantrum when she found out that the girls wanted nothing to do with her and insisted to our parents that I shouldn't spend time with these mean girls either, as I was her sister and I should stand up for her. I refused and told her it was her fault they didn't want to be friends with her. But my parents were as supportive as ever and gave me a talking to about how Vicky didn't have any bad intentions and that I should try and convince the girls that forgive Vicky. But if they didn't, then I should stay away from them too. I refused, and I stood my ground. I liked hanging out with them, and unlike Vicky, I wasn't going to jeopardize my friendship. No way. I told my parents that I'd had enough and that it wasn't my responsibility to find help for Vicky. My parents got angry and turned their backs on me for weeks, but I'm glad I stood my ground. This group of girls has remained my friends to this day and are basically like sisters. I've cried with them, laughed with them, and shared some of the most meaningful moments of my life. That wasn't the only reason Vicky grew to hate me. There was also another incident with a boy that she had a crush on, a boy who I had no idea about and who I sat next to in some classes. Because we were friends, tried to ask me to the prom, but I politely declined because I was already seeing someone that I liked. Later on, when Vicky found out, she made a huge fuss about it, telling my parents how she always brought me things that she wanted and that I flirted with the boy. Knowing what she felt, for months she called me a lot of nasty words that no one should say to their own sister, and she told my parents how she wished I wasn't her sister. My mother got
on his side, telling me that what I did was wrong and that as a sister, I should respect girl code. I tried to tell him that I wasn't even interested in the guy and that I had turned down his invitation, so she was free to ask him out if she wanted to. But Vicky refused to let it go. Looking back, I think she knew the guy would have turned her down anyways, so she just wanted to get back at me because he had invited me instead of her. One time, my dad took me out for ice cream, telling me that he wanted to spend some father-daughter time with me. This had never happened before, so I was really happy. However, he started asking me a lot of questions, like if my boyfriend and I were being careful, if my boyfriend came from a good family, or if my boyfriend and I did drugs. I was shocked by his line of questioning, and I asked him what he meant by all of that. Was it for? So when my dad revealed it, I saw that he had been making up stories, telling my parents for months that I did drugs and drank alcohol with my boyfriend. This was a complete lie, and I showed my dad my phone so he would verify that Vicky was lying. Later, when my dad confronted her about all the lies, she tried to justify that no one our age just spends time with a boy and that I was hiding things from everyone. I was so angry, I yelled at her for trying to create an unnecessary problem. And I told her it wasn't my fault that she didn't have anyone to date, but that she needed to stop interfering in my life. Vicky wouldn't have it and hit me. This happened out of nowhere as she had never been physically violent before. My nose started bleeding as I fell to the ground, clutching my face in pain. My parents rushed me to the hospital, and the whole time they were begging me not to file a complaint against Vicky, saying how it would ruin her life, while I sat in the back seat clutching my face. Vicky didn't even care or even apologize. Later on, when the nurse asked me about the incident, I told her the truth, and she called Child Protective Services. My parents were furious with me for involving Child Protective Services, seeing it as a betrayal of family loyalty. In their eyes, Vicky's actions were treated as a mere accident and an isolated incident that did not warrant such drastic intervention. They pleaded with the authorities, insisting that Vicky was not a danger to me and that her actions were out of character. In the end, Vicky was released, but they warned my parents that they would be closely monitoring our situation in case of any further accidents. As you can imagine, Vicky was really upset, as were my parents. My parents later told me that they were disappointed in me for trying to ruin my sister's life. My mother began to cry and told me how I was tearing the family apart by getting other people involved. My father's disappointment was palpable. He was always full of reproach as he questioned my decision to escalate the situation. I told him firmly that I wanted Vicky out of my life, and they agreed. I felt guilty for involving the authorities, but for the first time I felt safe in my own home. Once I saw that I had been formally warned, my parents had a separate conversation with her, and from that day on, she stopped speaking to me completely. I much prefer this to her constantly hanging around me or trying to inserting themselves into my life. When my grandparents found out about this incident, they asked me to pack my things so that I could live with them for the rest of high school. They informed my parents, who didn't protest much, so I went to live with my grandparents. Unlike my parents' home, I felt safe and loved. Here, the remaining days of high school went well, and I made lasting memories with my friends. My parents never visited me nor called me in all that time. I knew they were happy with their loving daughter, so I never tried to contact them. Although it hurt me that they could so easily dismiss me as if I was nothing, when I graduated from high school, my parents made the day about Vicky. They didn't even congratulate me and approach me, and I felt as if I was a stranger to them. However, my grandparents were there and scolded my parents for being so obvious about their favoritism. I don't know what my grandfather told them, but my dad then awkwardly approached me, and I later found out that I was accepted into a good university with a full scholarship. I was very happy about that because I was afraid to ask my parents for financial aid. I informed my grandparents about this, and they invited me out to dinner at a nice restaurant. After dinner, my grandmother posted pictures of me on her Facebook account, writing a long caption about how proud she was of me for being an exceptional student. Our relatives found out soon enough and joined in the congratulations. I guess some of them might have told my parents, who had no idea about all of this.
Instead of feeling happy about it, my mom called me the next day to tell me that Vicky had locked herself in her room crying because she hadn't been accepted into any college, and that I was consciously trying to make my sister feel bad about her grades by talking to all of our relatives. She told me that this was all my fault because apparently she was depressed after the incident with Child Protective Services, and I had pushed her to get bad grades. I was so incredibly heartbroken that my own mom could blame me for anything. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. My grandparents helped me move into my college dorm because my high school boyfriend's college was far away from me. We had broken up, so I walked into college single. The breakup had been rough, but I was excited to meet new people. This is where I met Rob, and he and I were both freshmen, and we would spend half of our days in the library. Rob was unlike anyone I'd ever met before. He's a quiet person and enjoyed studying. He was similar to me. We quickly found common ground, our shared love for college. As the weeks turned into months, our friendship blossomed into something deeper, and I realized that I had developed feelings for Rob that went beyond just friendship. Being outgoing, I was pretty direct about my feelings for Rob, and I was shocked to learn that he felt the same. We started dating and have been together for 8 years. My grandparents have met Rob, and they simply adore him. I've met Rob's parents, who literally treat me like their own daughter. On occasion, Rob's mom has even confessed to me how she's always wished for a daughter, so she's happy that Rob has met a wonderful person like me. To be honest, this is the first time that I'm surrounded by family members who appreciate me and don't hold grudges. I've told Rob stories from my childhood, and he listens and knows what my relationship with Vicky is like over these past 8 years. My parents, they've barely contacted me except to send me the occasional birthday text, if they remembered, but that's about it. Recently, Rob and I got engaged. He proposed to me while we were hiking towards our usual sunrise spot, and it was the ultimate dream proposal. It was so sweet to see how nervous he was to pop the question, and I had no doubts in my mind when I accepted the proposal. I posted pictures of my engagement on my Instagram and also informed my grandparents about it. They were so happy for me and congratulated us on our future. I guess the news must have spread because my parents called me out of the blue to congratulate me. I also thought it was just a casual conversation since we hadn't spoken for years. They asked me about my life, my job, my apartment, before my dad straight up asked me if he could walk me down the aisle. I was surprised by his sudden question, as a few moments before I had no idea what company I worked for. I told him that I hadn't thought about it yet, and my dad told me that it would be embarrassing if I didn't invite him and that others would question us about it, so it would be best if he walked me down the aisle. I told my parents that I didn't even know if I was going to invite them to my wedding since we hadn't been in touch. But this bothered my parents. My mom started telling me how disappointed she was with my answer, emphasizing the importance of family and tradition. She continued telling me how it would always be with my parents no matter what, and that I should let the past go. Part of me was tempted to listen to my parents and take them up on the offer because I wanted our relationship to be repaired. But another part of me was hesitant, afraid of opening myself up again to potential disappointments and hurt feelings. However, I was about to start a new chapter of my life in a few months. So I told my dad that he could walk me down the aisle, and he seemed thrilled. During the wedding preparations, I reached out to my high school friends who I had always kept in touch with, despite the physical distance that had grown between us due to our careers. I told them how I wanted the group to get together and that I wanted them to be my bridal party. There were many happy tears and congratulations, and without hesitation, they accepted my invitation to be part of my bridal party. It was an opportunity for us all to get together again.
We planned to go to Las Vegas to celebrate my bachelorette party, while Rick had a separate bachelorette party with his friends. Also, my friends and I posted a ton of pictures from the party, and overall, everyone had a great time. However, when I returned home, my parents called me to inform me how disappointed they were that I hadn't invited Vicky to be a part of the celebration. I told them that there was no way I would have involved Vicky in my bachelorette party, and that I didn't want her to be a part of my life. This shocked my parents, and they asked me what I meant. So I clarified that Vicky's actions, particularly her history of lying and gossiping, had left me deeply hurt and distrustful of her intentions. I couldn't imagine inviting her to such an intimate and joyful occasion like my bachelorette party, knowing that her presence would make my party less happy. I also informed my parents that this was the reason why she wasn't invited to my wedding either. Upon hearing this, my parents lost their temper. They complained that I had no right to exclude my sister from my wedding, and that it was my duty as her sister to include her in such important events. I was told that Vicky was excited to meet me after finding out that I was getting married. I was confused, so I asked my parents what gave her that idea, since we hadn't even spoken to each other for a long time. But my parents brushed off my concerns, saying that's not how sisters behave. I told them, you have to understand that my relationship with Vicky is complicated. After everything she's been through, I just don't feel comfortable having her as a part of my wedding. Not even once has she apologized to me for everything she put me through. However, my parents generally ignored my words. My mom kept saying how she wanted everything to be sorted out and that I should make an effort to invite Vicky. My dad insisted that our relatives would talk about why my sister wasn't invited, and this would end up affecting my wedding. However, I knew better than to give in to their demands, so I didn't give in to them. I told them that it was okay for people to talk behind my back and question my character, as long as I was surrounded by people I liked and trusted during my wedding. My mom then asked if my fiancé would be okay with this, and also attempted to use the in-laws letter, as she would judge me for being so incredibly cruel as to exclude my own sister from my wedding. I laughed it off and informed my parents that my fiancé and in-laws knew about my family dynamics, and none of them would care whether Vicky was present. They pressured me, suggesting the importance of family unity and forgiveness, but I didn't budge an inch due to the fact that I was unwilling to compromise my own well-being for the sake of appeasing others. In the end, we agreed to disagree, each of us holding on to our own perspectives. My parents told me that they needed to think things through, and we ended our conversation there. I informed my grandparents about this because I was feeling a bit guilty for standing up to my parents, and they were fully supportive. My grandparents told me that I shouldn't force myself into inviting anyone I didn't want there, and that my parents, as usual, were trying to guilt me into feeling. Since this conversation, I have felt a little better about my decision and have distracted myself with wedding preparations. Given that my wedding is drawing closer, last week, my dad called me to inform me that he had been thinking a lot and that he and Mom would no longer be attending the wedding. Before I could react, he went on to say that this also meant that he would not be walking me down the aisle. I asked him if there was a specific reason, and he informed me that Vicky would be moving to a new place soon that my parents had helped her find, and since I was going to exclude her from the wedding, she had decided to throw a housewarming party for herself that day, so they would be attending that. The venue of my wedding, I couldn't believe what my dad was telling me. Why he wasn't even being invited in the first place, let alone walking me down the aisle. But he did consider telling me that he was the one who had decided not to do it. However, the idea that my own sister's housewarming party was taking priority over my wedding was a huge blow. That was a continuation of what I had felt for years. I simply told him that I understood and hung up the call. Although I tried to act brave in front of my dad, deep down the sting of rejection hit me. When I told Rob, he was furious at how insensitive my parents agreed. So I called my grandparents and asked if they would be willing to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. I couldn't contain myself as I asked my grandpa. "You and Grandpa, you have always been there for me," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "You have been more than just grandparents to me. You have been like parents, and I can't imagine anyone else that I would want by my side on my wedding day." My grandpa didn't even hesitate before saying yes. He told me how honored he would be to walk me down the aisle, and unlike my parents, he wouldn't let me down. His words put me at ease, and in that moment, I felt a deep sense of peace. With my grandparents by my side, I knew I had a family that loved me unconditionally and accepted me just as I am with all my imperfections. I also spoke to my father-in-law about this, and ours parents assured me that they didn't mind if my parents didn't attend, and that regardless of their presence, they were thrilled to witness and support our union. My wedding is in 2 days, and today I woke up to several missed calls from my dad. I called him back thinking it was an emergency, and when he answered, he asked me if it was true that my grandpa would be walking me down the aisle. I told him yes, it was true, and then my dad got enraged, saying how disrespectful it was that I asked my grandpa. I reminded him how he was the one who decided not to come to my wedding, so I didn't understand why he was so upset. My dad continued yelling at me about how him and Mom were just trying to make me see the wrongness of my actions, and that they thought declining would teach me a lesson. He went on to say how him and Mom raised me and paid for my food and education, so my grandpa had no right to replace him. I tried to reason with him, explaining that my grandpa had been there for me in ways that he and Mom never were, but he didn't want to listen. He also told me how I had done nothing but push everyone away from me and that this was all my fault. I don't think I did anything wrong in this situation. I guess everyone would have done the same. But since the subreddit requires me to ask the question, am I the bad guy for asking my granddad to walk me down the aisle and not my dad? Update 1. Many weighed in and most said no. I've seen lots of advice and suggestions on how I should approach the situation. I do agree that I need to permanently cut off contact with my parents because their constant indecisiveness is exhausting and it's starting to affect my mental health. I don't want them in my life when they've consistently shown me that Vicky is always their first priority. My parents are selfish, and I've known this for a long time. However, how can a daughter just stop loving their parents? It's a lot easier said than done, but it's very difficult to actually do. However, for my peace of mind, I have no choice but to do it so I can enjoy my wedding tomorrow. Update 2. Sorry for the lack of update this past month, but I've been quite busy since my wedding in the first place. Yes, my wedding was quite good with my granddad by my side as I walked down the aisle despite my parents' absence. I couldn't be happier as we exchanged vows with Rob, committing to spending the rest of our lives together. My friends and I danced the night away, and I can't begin to describe how important it is to stay in touch with your childhood friends no matter what, because sometimes they are your chosen family. During the reception, I felt the slight pang as I realized that my parents were not there to share this special moment, especially when I saw Rob's parents and cousins giving speeches for him. However, I found solace in the knowledge that I had made the right decision for me, prioritizing my own well-being and happiness. Some of my friends gave speeches sharing memories of our experiences and the bond that had carried us through both the good and the bad times in life. In the days following the wedding, Rob and I went on our honeymoon, which his parents had paid for as a wedding present. I spent all my days just lazing around, enjoying time with my husband. I feel so excited every time I look at Rob and realize that he is now married to me. As I mentioned earlier, I cut off all contact with my parents, blocking them everywhere. I didn't bother sending them an explanation because, quite frankly, they don't even deserve one. I have no idea if Vicky actually had a housewarming party that day, or if it was just an excuse for my parents not to attend my wedding, but at this point, I don't care. I wish them and their beloved daughter nothing but the best. Update 3. I had no intention of sharing more
From my last update, but something unexpected just happened, and I think you all deserve to know. I hadn't checked my email in the last month because of my wedding and honeymoon, but today as I was checking emails, I came across an email from Vicky. I don't even know how she found my email address, and I was completely shocked. I hesitated on whether to open her email or just delete it without reading it. But as the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. Inside was a lengthy message from Vicky expressing her regret for our strained relationship and her desire to reconcile. She acknowledged the mistakes she had made in the past, admitting that she had been selfish and immature. Vicky apologized for the hurt she had caused me over the years and expressed a genuine desire to make amends. She went on to write how she is happy for me now that I am married and that she wishes me nothing but the best. She ended the email pleading that I not punish my parents by cutting them off and that they missed me. As I read her words, I felt a mixture of emotions: surprise, skepticism, part of me wants to believe that Vicky really has changed, that she is sincere in her apology and is willing to work to repair our relationship, but another part of me remains doubtful because this all seems too good to be true. However, regardless of what she has written, I know for a fact that my parents do not miss me, because if they did, they would not have treated me like this all these years. I thought about sending her a reply, but then decided against it. After all, forgiveness is not something to be rushed. It is a process that takes time and reflection. Even so, I don't know if I want to be in a relationship with her again. I could forgive her, but that does not mean that we will finally be sisters now. To be honest, after my marriage, I no longer feel alone. I have learned to recognize that I have my loving husband by my side, supportive friends, and unwavering support of my grandparents. And with their support, I know that I can face any challenge that comes my way without needing Vicky or my parents in my life. I have also done my research and found a good therapist who I have booked my first appointment with. I have taken this step so that I can address and resolve any hurts from my past and heal from them. Update 4. I think I was right not to reply to the email I mentioned in the last update, because now everything comes to light. It turns out that Vicky did not write anything, and that it was my parents using her account. That is why she insisted so much that I forgave my parents, because they were the ones who had written. I know because I ran into Vicky by chance one day, and when I greeted her, she looked at me with a face of disgust. As always, I told her about the email, since I thought that my lack of response was the problem, and she told me that she had not sent me anything. She took out her phone and found the email in the inbox, but she swore that she had not written anything. At that moment, we both realized who was the author of that, since surely some computer in the house still had Vicky's session open. I also asked her about her housewarming party, and she told me that had not happened. So as I suspected, it was all a lie from my parents. Then each one went their own way, and that was it. Honestly, I do not know who was worse in my life, if my sister or my parents. Because at this point, what happened to my parents? It is already too twisted. At least now everyone is going to know because I made a post on my Instagram with the links to my Reddit, by which the whole family and close people are reading this story.